I am a motorhead. A motorhead being somebody that loves anything with an engine, mostly cars, but motorcycles, trucks, anything like that. I come by it honestly because my dad was also a motorhead. He grew up in the days of his first car was a Model T Ford, and he used to run that out in the fields and stripped it down and did all sorts of things to it. So that said, I was either 13 or 14 years old. I didn't have a driver's license yet, I know. And one day my dad came driving home in a new, I'll call it a new car. Maybe I should say a different car. It was a 1934 Ford. And he pulled up by the house, and I happened to be outside, and I walked over to see what this was. And my dad was just beaming. He wasn't the type to beam a lot, but he was excited. What he had done was gone to an auction, or I guess it was more of an estate sale. A couple had bought this 1934 Ford when it was brand new from a dealer in 1934. They drove it home, put it in the garage, and the man passed away. He had a heart attack within days after they bought the car. His wife, his widow, didn't drive, so the car sat in the garage for many, many years. Until she passed away. And then the car and the house and all of her property was put on an estate sale. And that's where Dad bought this car. It was a brand new 1934 Ford. Brand new in the sense that it was in mint condition. He took me around and showed me the things on that car. We kicked the tires, we popped the hood, and he told me about that. It was one of the first V8 engines Ford had, and he told me what a great engine that was and what a great car it was, and we sat inside of it, and he finally said, well, we better go in the house. It was time for supper. He had just come home from work. After supper, he asked if anybody wanted to go for a ride in his new old Ford. And I was quite excited about it, being another motorhead. I said, yeah, me, I want to go. My mother and sister passed on it. They weren't interested at all. So Dad and I went out and got in the car. He started it up, and he drove, I think it was about a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks, to where a friend of his lived. And his friend was out mowing the yard. We pulled up, and the guy shut off his lawnmower and came over. And Dad went through the whole story again with his friend, telling him about the engine and so forth. And we were there probably half hour or so, at least that long, kicking tires and talking about the car. Then the guy went back to mowing his lawn, and we got back in the car and we drove another block or two to another friend's house. Same routine. Dad was showing off his car. I thought when he asked me to go off for a ride, I thought maybe we'd go out in the country and we'd see how fast it would go, or spin the tires on some gravel or something like that. But we just went from house to house, telling the same story over and over again until it got dark and we went home. I don't think we ever got out of our neighborhood. I don't think we ever put a full mile on the car that night. The next day, I got up in the morning, and I had learned something early that summer. School was out now, so I had no reason to get up. And if I got up while my parents were still home, my mother would find some chores for me, and she'd make a list of things for me to do. So I just stayed in bed until I knew they were gone. Then I'd get out of bed. I got out of bed, had breakfast, went outside, looked at that car, and decided I better call a friend. I called a friend of mine who also knew cars and liked cars and was interested in them. And I told him to get over here. I got something to show you. Wasn't long. He came down the alley all riding his bike. He had a big red Schwinn and pulled into the backyard, and he said, "What's up?" And I pointed, parked on the street on by the curb, that old Ford. Dad had said he wasn't going to take it to work. He didn't want to put a lot of miles on it or take a chance that it got scratched or door dings or anything like that. He wanted to keep it nice. And so he had left it home while he went to work. I took my buddy over. We kicked the tires, popped the hood. I had memorized all of the stories that Dad had told the night before and talked about the V8 engine and so forth. And we got inside of the car and kind of daydreamed about what we would do if we had that car. In a couple of years, maybe we'd buy something like that. We'd put on smaller tires and we'd put in a bigger engine, whatever. Drive it to California, paint it bright red, something. Just dreaming. And then my friend went home. That night at supper, Dad asked again, "Anybody want to go for a ride in my car?" This time I passed because I had the story memorized already. The next morning, I got up and I waited until my parents were gone. I got my bowl of Wheaties and I was sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast, my breakfast of Wheaties. And there was a corner of the table, or one side of the table, that was against the wall, and that seemed to collect stuff. There was always a few pieces of mail. I'm sure everybody has a little area like that. And there was something sticking out, and I reached over and touched it and grabbed it, and it was a brass key. And then I realized, that's the key to the old Ford. All sorts of wild thoughts went through my mind. I went and called my friend. Told him, "Get over here." He says, "Now what's up?" I says, "I got something else to show you." And when he showed up, I showed him the key. That's all I had to do. And he says, "Oh my God, you got the key to the Ford?" He says, "We got to take it for a ride." Now I argued him and I said, no, we can't do that. My dad will catch me, he'll know it. He says, no, we can cover it. I had called him just to convince me to do it. I knew that he would. So I says, okay, let's plan this out. He said, well, we got the key. We should mark the car where it's parked so we get it back in the same place. Okay, we took some sticks and made marks on the street that only us knew that where they were, so we could get it right back exactly where it was. We took a lead pencil, marked the gas gauge, so we could fill the tank up. We had cans for lawnmower gas and so forth that we could add gas to get it up to that level. And the next thing we thought of was, we don't want to do it right before he comes home. He might touch the hood and find the engine's hot. No. He says, your dad comes home at 12 for lunch? Yeah. And he leaves at 1. We decided to, right at 1 o'clock, as soon as Dad's out of sight, we'll take it for a ride. Then the engine will be cooled down by the time he gets off of work at 5.